Hello and welcome to this first look, the continuing first look exploring session looking at the return from Parnassus, or the Scourge of Simony, performed by some students in St John's College in Cambridge. We are, say, about a third of the way through the play so far, but this is, even though it's Return from Parnassus Part 2, I keep wanting to say return to Parnassus. I keep wanting to add an extra to, but it's not, it's from. But we've already had a return from before this and another Parnassus play before that. So even though it's part 2, it's also sort of part 3. And this is the second session looking at part 2, anyway. It's not as complicated as I'm deliberately making it sound for effect. Anyway, reading from Act 2, Scene 5 onwards, today we have reading Amoretto most of the time, Recorder, and Furor is...
Lynsey Beauchamp, actor in Kirkcaldy, Fife, Scotland.
Reading Sir Raderick's page and Philomusus is...
Rachael Nicole opened the chat accidentally while I was trying to unmute.
Reading Sir Raderick himself, Ingenioso and Studioso is...
I am Eric, and I am all of those things.
Popping in to read an as yet unassigned page is...
I am Greg, and I seem to have lived on Zoom today.
Reading Immerito, Phantasma, and Prodigo is...
Steve Longstaffe. I started on Zoom at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Higher, lower. Reading Amoretto's page, Academico, and briefly Amoretto themselves in Act 4, Scene 1 is...
Lois, I live in London. I hope I don't confuse you.
And I'm your host, Robert Crighton. I will be reading the occasional stage direction. It is not heavily stage directed, and some things are confusing, and we're not quite sure where they go between the sources for the text. If only someone somewhere would give us a lovely, shiny new edition. Anyway, we are midway through Act 2. There were some people on stage. Some of them may have left. Some of them may have entered. It is not quite sure precisely how the progression goes. We seem to have on stage at this moment Amoretto and Academico, and we will see what we shall see. So, take it away.
Gallant, i' faith.
I see we scholars fish for a living in these shallow fords without a silver hook. Why would it not gall a man to see a spruce-gartered youth of our college a while ago be a broker for a living and an old bawd for a benefice? This sweet sir proffered me much kindness when he was of our college, and now I'll try what wind remains in this bladder. God save you, sir.
By the mass, I fear me I have seen this genus and species in Cambridge before now. I'll take no notice of him now, by the faith of a gentleman that is a pretty elegy. Of what age is the day, fella? Sarah boy, have the groom saddled my hunting hobby? Can Robin Hunter tell where a hare sits?
Sir, a poor old friend of yours, sir, of St John's College in Cambridge.
Oh, good fate, sir, you must pardon me, I have forgotten you.
My name is Academico, sir. One that made an oration for you once on the Queen's Day, and a show that you got credit by.
It may be so, but I've forgotten it. Mary, yet I remember there was such a fellow that I was very beneficial unto in my time. But howsoever, sir, I have the courtesy of the town for you. I am sorry you did not take me at my father's house, but now I am in exceeding great haste, for I have vowed the death of a hare that we found this morning musing on her maze.
Sir, I am emboldened by that great acquaintance that heretofore I had with you, as likewise it hath pleased you heretofore.
Look, Sarah, if you see my hobby, come hitherward as yet.
You make me some promises. I am to request your good mediation to the worshipful your father in my behalf, and I will dedicate to yourself in the way of thanks those days I have to live.
Oh, good sir, if I had known your mind before, for my father hath already given the induction to a chaplain of his own to a proper man, I know not of what university he is.
Signor Immerito, they say, hath bidden fairest for it.
I know not his name, but he is a grave, discreet man, I warrant him. Indeed, he wants utterance in some measure.
Nay, methinks he hath very good utterance for his gravity, for he came hither very grave, but I think he will return light enough when he is rid of the heavy element he carries about him.
Faith, sir, you must pardon me. It is my ordinary custom to be too studious. My mistress hath told me of it often, and I find it to hurt my ordinary discourse. But say, sweet sir, do ye affect the most gentlemanlike game of hunting?
Hunters, how say you to the crafty gull? He would fain get me abroad to make sport with me, for there's hunters' terms, which we scholars are not acquainted with. Sir, I have loved this kind of sport well, but now I begin to hate it. For it hath been my luck always to beat the bush while another killed the hare.
Hunter's luck, sir, but there was a fault in your hounds that did not spend well.
Sir, I have had worse luck always at hunting of the fox.
What, sir, do you mean at the unkenneling, untappazing, or earthing of the fox?
I mean earthing, if you term it so, for I never found yellow earth enough to cover the old fox your father in.
Good faith, sir, there is an excellent skill in blowing the terriers. It is a word that we hunters use when the fox is earthed. You must blow one long, two short, the second wind one long, two short. Now, sir, in blowing, every long containeth 7 quavers, 1 minimum and 1 quaver, and 1 minimum containeth 4 quavers, 1 short containeth 3 quavers.
To sort of take stock of what's going on between these two people, because of course it's an awkward situation when you sort of go up to someone, "Hi, do you remember me?" And you go, "No, yeah, but were you the guy?" Yeah, and that sort of awkward exchange, and of course one wants something out of the other, and it's interesting how Amoretto just sort of does seem to have head in the clouds all the time, and even though there's a lot of a lot of privilege there, it's just
I think he's just pretending to have his head in the clouds, isn't he?
Yeah, it's I wasn't quite sure precisely how he was functioning, Amoretto, because he's doing when we first met him yesterday, doing an awful lot of poetic-y things and stuff. And then pulling back in a slightly different way here. So I was wondering how precisely to pitch that. Whereas Academico is obviously of a very different fish and a very different situation. Any thoughts from the room while we contemplate how many times to blow on a horn and what pattern? How, as we sort of tune into what this text is doing, Lynsey's come into this completely fresh, not here yesterday, so I don't know how you're sinking into this universe.
I'm just sort of reading with as much gusto and fluidity as I can pretend. I think at the start it seems that he thinks he recognizes Academico, but he's pretending not to. And it sounds as if he's talking to his page at some points, but the page doesn't actually seem to be there. So, of what age is the day, fellow? Sir, a boy, hath the groom saddled my hunting hobby? Can Robin Hunter tell where a hare sits? Unless he's pretending to mistake Academico for a servant or something like that. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, because I was wondering that at times, and I was sort of vacillating between the two.
Maybe calling off stage if there isn't anybody actually there. I mean, his page might be there. But yeah, I think he's just doing his best to ignore Academico. And even when he's talking to Academico, he's still thinking of other things. But yeah, I don't think it's so much that he's absent-minded. I think he knows perfectly well that he's not going to do whatever Academico wants. Academico is bound to be asking a favor, and he doesn't want to grant it.
And the text isn't giving us particularly clear instances of when the asides are happening, though you're doing some lovely asides. The cover the old fox your father in was quite nicely spun. I think that, yes, that's absolutely right. Any other thoughts to throw in before we conclude this scene and take a little further?
I think there's an element of double talk in this. I mean, what Academico says about he's playing this hunting language because he knows we scholars don't know it. And I think they're getting into a kind of game where Amoretto is deliberately using a lot of technical terms. And I think Academico, I can't really make out because I've completely forgotten what this scene is, but I think he's playing the same game, using language that is either genuine or made up. I don't know which.
Okay, well, let's pick it up from Academico. Sir, might I find any favour in my suit? So Amoretto has been talking through the minims and the quavers and the quavers and the minims. Actually, I thought it was going to be more complicated than that, but no, it's just there seems to be an Oberosian circle of minims and quavers there.
All right. Sir, might I find any favor in my suit? I would wind the horn wherein your boon deserts should be sounded with so many minims, so many quavers.
Sweet sir, I could confer this or any kindness upon you. I wonder the boy comes not away with my hobby. Now, sir, as I was proceeding, when you blow the death of your fox in the field or covert, then must you sound 3 notes with 3 winds and recheat. Mark you, sir, upon the same with 3 winds.
I pray you, sir.
When you come to your stately gate, as you sounded the retreat before, now you must sound the relief 3 times.
Relief, call you it? It were good every patron would wind that horn.
Oh, sir, but your relief is your chiefest and sweetest note. That is, sir, when your hounds hunt after a game unknown. And then you must sound 1 long and 6 short, the 2nd wind, 2 short and 1 long, the 3rd wind, 1 long and 2 short.
True, sir. It is very good trade nowadays to be a villain. I am the hound that hunts after a game unknown, and he blows the villain.
Sir, I will bless your ears with a very pretty story. My father, out of his own cost and charges, keeps an open table for all kinds of dogs.
He keeps 1 more by thee.
He hath your greyhound, your mongrel, your mastiff, your lurrier, your spaniel, your kennets, terriers, butcher's stock, bloodhounds, dunghill dogs, trindle-tails, prick-eared curs, small ladies' puppies, ratchers, and bastards.
What a bawdy knave hath he to his father, that keeps his Rachael, hath his bastards, and lets his son be plain lady's puppy to be Ray, a lady's chamber.
It was my pleasure 2 days ago to take a gallant leash of greyhounds, and into my father's park I went, accompanied with 2 or 3 noblemen of my near acquaintance, desiring to show them some of the sport. I caused the keeper to sever the rascal deer from the bucks of the first head. Now, sir, a buck, the 1st year, is a fawn, the 2nd year, a pricket, the 3rd year, a sorrel, the 4th year, a soar, the 5th, a buck of the 1st head, the 6th year, a complete buck. As likewise your heart is the 1st year a calf, the 2nd year a brochet, the 3rd year a spade, the 4th year a stag, the 5th year a great stag, the 6th year a hart. As likewise, the roebuck is the 1st year a kid, the 2nd year a girl, the 3rd year a hemmeuse, and these are your special beasts for chase, or as we huntsmen call it, a venery.
Chase to be taken for venery, thou art a more special beast than any in thy father's forest. Sir, I am sorry I have been so troublesome to you.
I knew this was the readiest way to chase away the scholar by getting him into a subject he cannot talk of for his life. Sir, I will borrow so much time of you as to finish this my begun story. Now, sir, after much travel, we singled a buck. I rode that same time upon a roan gelding, and stood to intercept him from the thicket. The buck broke gallantly. My great swift, being disadvantaged in his slip, was at the first behind. Marry, presently he coated and outstripped them, when, as the hart, it presently descended to the river, and being in the water, proffered and re-proffered and proffered again, and at last he upstarted at the other side of the water, which we call the soil of the hart, and their other huntsman met him with an adontrally. We followed in hard chase for the space of 8 hours. Thrice our hounds were at default, and then we cried a slain, straight Soho. Through good reclaiming, my faulty hounds found their game again, and so went through the wood with gallant noise of music, resembling so many viols to gambo. At last the hart laid him down, and whilst the hounds seized upon him, he groaned and wept and died. In good faith, it made me weep too, to think of Actaeon's fortune, which my quid speaks of. Militat omnes amans et habet sua castra Cupido.
Sir, can you put me in any hope of obtaining my suit?
In good faith, sir, if I did not love you as my soul, I would not make you acquainted with the mysteries of my art.
Nay, I will not die of a discourse yet, if I can choose.
So, sir, when we had rewarded our dogs with the small guts and the lights and the blood, the huntsman hallowed Soho, Venus, a coupler, and so coupled the dogs, and then returning homeward, another company of hounds that lay at advantage had their couples cast off, and we might hear the huntsman's cry, "Horse, decouple, avant!" But straight we heard him cry, "Le amende!" And by that I knew that they had the hare and on foot, and by I might see him saw and resaw, prick and re-prick. Ah, what? Is he gone? These scholars are the simplest creatures.
Yes, after talking non-stop about hunting for quite a lot of words, you have finally overcome Academico. I mean, it's almost like the overall game here is actually who holds the stage. And following, I mean, throughout the play, actually, it's almost like, someone does their turn and it's up to the next person to drive them away and until they're in that position. Because there's some really interesting stuff in there, some of which sounds plausible and some of which sounds obviously adjusted. And it's that thing of I'm not quite sure how much is true and how much is not. Sort of the age of the deer and things.
That's a very useful passage, actually.
Yeah.
Quote it in almost any place where you had to gloss one of those terms.
I mean, I'm assuming it's accurate. It seems awfully plausible to me, but I don't know if anyone knows more or less on that. Rachael, thoughts?
All this talk of dogs, didn't we read something else where they kept bringing up dogs, and it was supposed to be a spoof of something some other playwright had written, like they had this imagery of dogs all the time, like how Lily's always bringing up these birds or something. There's like, is it something like that?
I don't know. I can't remember anything to do with dogs. I do remember the lily and the birds. I'd forgotten all about that, Lois.
Yeah, in The Malcontent, I think Machiavelli has this passage about her two dogs and how she sometimes favors one and sometimes the other, and she goes on and on about them. And then I guess they call Diogenes a dog, don't they?
Eric.
Also, in one of the other Musson plays that we've done, I think it was, I can't remember his name now, which is a bit embarrassing. But not the fawn, the one we did before the fawn. Between the malcontent and the fawn, anyway. What you will. he goes on about, he does that long speech about his dog and sort of faithfulness of the dog, something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
There's that speech about "and still my spaniel slept," isn't there?
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Oh God, yeah, that was a good bit. That yeah. Anyway, we talked about
Also, we
Marston
had
yesterday,
Sky
so
puppies
it's
yesterday.
so they know he's there. Whether he's written those bits yet is, however, debatable. But that's an interesting connection. Yeah, I mean, how are you finding doing these long tirades, deliberately being boring, but don't be boring.
Well, yes. I mean, I don't know, with enthusiasm for the game, I guess. But it's quite funny. I mean, as you say, that there are no stage directions, so Academico must bugger off fairly soon after his last line. And so Amoretto is left declaiming to an empty stage apart from himself, which must be quite funny for the audience, I suppose.
Yeah, because there is room for game between the two of them, because Academico presumably is trying to get a word in edgeways every so often, as is Stephen. Stephen.
I think somebody else had their hand up. Sorry. No. Yeah, I was wondering if the way to do this is either to do it full on tragical storytelling, or just to string it out forever. I was looking at the punctuation, because there's an awful lot of commas in there, isn't there? It seems to be sort of paratactic, sort of adding on syntax, as if something else occurs and then that gets said. But it put me in mind of it. There's an old comedy sketch on, I think it was The Day to Day, with a bloke who was a swimming pool attendant talking about in 1983, nobody died. In 1984, and it goes on, and then somebody dies. It's kind of like that, do it like Pinter or something. You just bang in those pauses, and he's poor old Academico is starting to fray at the edges, isn't he? Saying, I'm sorry, and it just kind of steamrollers over him. So it might not be a kind of fireworky display of all these technical terms so much as just somebody stringing it out as long as possible.
Rachael, then Eric.
That makes me think of was it the first one or the second Parnassus? I don't remember if it's the trip to Parnassus or on the return, or if it's Studioso. I forget who it is. It might be Ingenioso, when he's meeting with the one guy that tells him, oh no, he doesn't want any of the poems that are like Chaucer or Gower. He wants them by some guy that you guys said was like Andrew Lloyd Webber. I feel like there's something in that scene where Amoretto could be playing like he was the patron, like he was like that type of character, but he's not, and he's saying it slowly. Like if you were to play it like with the like Pinter, like Stephen was saying, that he could be playing it that way so that Academico like slowly drifts off, but he's still there, so he just keeps going and going and going to wear him down.
Well saved, by the way. You only get a half quack. Eric.
I was going to say, alternatively, it's kind of like, when you're really not into, I don't know, for example, a specific sport or something, I don't know, someone is really into curling or something, I don't know, and you just, like, get courted by them in the pub, and you just really, really need to go, you're trying to find a way out of that conversation, but they won't let you go or they're trying to get you to, I don't know, do something, I don't know, for them, and you just, that's how I picture this scene.
It's someone trying to explain how a board game works. It's someone explaining the rules of a really abstruse game, and you need to know all the rules, otherwise you can't play. You just can't start and then slowly filter them in. No, I have to explain them all in advance. Lois.
Yeah, I mean, it is clearly a game. They both sort of know it is, because Academico knows what Amoretto is trying to do, but he nevertheless lets him do it. I mean, I think that line must be an exit line. I will not die of a discourse yet if I can choose. He must decide that he's either going to die of boredom if he stays there, and on the whole, he would rather not get this job. He's probably given up on it anyway, than listen to any more of this. So I guess he must at some point. I mean, I thought probably his line before that indicated that he was pretty much giving up.
Rachael, and then we will move on.
One more question, like, because they did mention Johnson in this play from in this play of this series of plays before. And could the guys who wrote this, could they have seen that Isle of Dogs? And maybe could this be some sort of reference, all this dog talk be some sort of reference to that would have elicited a laugh, even though that play got the early modern shredder?
Well, the answer to that is nobody knows, because we don't really know anything about the content of the Isle of Dogs apart from its title. That they were that successful. It was a few years earlier, and if they were students, maybe they might not have had an opportunity to have caught it. So it's tricky to speculate. We have no data, alas. Probably turn out to be rubbish. But they don't tend to ban rubbish plays. They always ban really good ones. You don't ban rubbish ones. Well, actually, not quite true. Anyway, tangent. Amoretto is still on stage. Act 2, Scene 6 is joined by a page. Maybe it's the person who was calling off stage 2 earlier. Maybe it's someone entirely different. So let's hear what this page has to say.
I wonder what has become of that Ovid de Arte Amandi. My master, he that for the practice of his discourses wont to court his hobby abroad, and in his chamber makes a set speech to his greyhound. Oh, desiring that most fair and amiable dog to grace his company in a stately galliard. And if the dog, seeing him practice his lofty points, as his cross-point, his back caper, chanced to bewray the room, he presently doffs his cap, most solemnly makes a low leg to her ladyship, taking for the greatest favour in the world, she would vouchsafe to leave her civet box or her sweet glove behind. Oh.
And Amoretto opens his Ovid at some point, where this stage direction lives, we cannot be certain, and is reading it.
Not a word more, sir, it please your hobby will meet you at the lane's end.
What, Jack, faith, I cannot but vent unto thee a most witty jest of mine.
I hope my master will not break wind. It please you, sir, to bless mine ears with the discourse of it.
Good faith, the boy begins to have an elegant smack of my style. Why, then thus it was lack. A scurvy mere Cambridge scholar, I know not how to define him.
Nay, master, let me define a mere scholar. I heard a courtier once define a mere scholar to be animal scabioso. That is a living creature that is troubled with the itch. Or a mere scholar is a creature that can strike 5 in the morning at his tinderbox, put on a pair of lined slippers, sit rhyming till dinner, and then go to his meat when the bell rings. One that have a peculiar gift and a cough and a license to spit. Or if you will have him defined by negatives, he is one that cannot make a good leg, one that cannot eat a mess of broth cleanly, one that cannot ride a horse without spur-galling, one that cannot salute a woman and look at her directly, one that cannot...
Enough, Jack. I can stay no longer. I am so great in childbirth with this jest. Sirrah, this predictable, this saucy groom, because when I was in Cambridge and lay in a trundle bed under my tutor, I was content in discreet humility to give him some place at my table. And because I invited the hungry slave sometimes to my chamber, to the canvassing of a turkey pie or a piece of venison, which my lady grandmother sent me, He thought himself therefore eternally possessed of my love, and came hither to take acquaintance of me, and thought his old familiarity did continue, and would bear him out in a matter of weight. I could not tell how to get rid myself better. I could not tell how to rid myself better of the troublesome burr than by getting him into the discourse of hunting, and then tormenting him a while with our words of art. The poor scorpion became speechless and suddenly ravished. These clerks are simple fellows.
He reads Ovid.
Simple indeed they are, for they want your courtly composition of a fool and of a knave. Oh, good faith, sir, a most absolute jest, but methinks it might have been followed a little further.
As how, my little knave?
Why, sir, had you invited him home to dinner at your table why then, sir, had you invited him home to dinner at your table and have put the earning of a capon upon him, you should have seen him handle the knife so foolishly. They run through a jury of faces, then whacking his head and chewing his teeth in familiarity, venture upon it with the same method that he was wont to entrust an apple pie, or tyrannize over an egg and butter. Then would I applied him all dinner time with a clean trenchers. And still, when he had had a good bit of meat, I would have taken it from him by giving him a clean trencher, and so have starved him in kindness.
Well said, subtle Jack. Put me in mind when I return again, that I may make my lady mother laugh at the scholar. I'll to my game. For you, Jack, I would have you employ your time till my coming in watching what hour of the day my hawk mutes.
And exit Amoretto.
Is not this an excellent office to be apothecary to this worshipped hawk? Sits scoring on the wall how the physic works. And is not my master an absolute villain that loves his hawk, his hobby, and his greyhound, more than any mortal creature? Do but displays of a feather of his hawk's train, and he writhes his mouth and swears, for he can do that only with a good grace, that you are the most shallow-brained fellow that lives. Do but say his horse scales with a good presence, and he's your bond-slave. Oh, when he returns, I'll tell 20 admirable lies of his hawk, and then I shall be his little rogue, and his white villain for a whole week after. Well, let others complain, but I think there is no felicity to the serving of a fool.
And we can infer that this page exits. Seems that this page is probably going to turn out to be Amoretto's page as listed later. So it does seem to be the same person, but maybe it'll turn out to be that he's got two. Maybe he's got two. I don't know. It's the same game. It's basically the same game, except what the boree is becoming the borer, or the borer is becoming the boree. It's there's some really interesting stuff going in here, but it is that basically it's the same game going on between them. Any thoughts from the room about this exchange? Because this is the end of the unit of action that we started yesterday that flowed, as it were, all together. Eric.
I like the idea that sort of Amoretto is like, I'm in a hurry, you have to stop, you have to help me with this situation, and then just stands there reading Ovid. Just, what? Yeah, I don't know. It's a bit sort of weird.
Yeah, Amoretto has a number of ways of getting away, ignoring people, one of which is just to stand there reading. It doesn't work with an academic. They might ask you questions about it, which he could answer. But with a page, no, back to the Ovid. I'm just going to read Ovid at you in a pointed fashion. I've never done that on a train before. Any other thoughts about what's with this little relationship, Et? Were we laughing? Were we getting the jokes? Were we confused? Were we lost? We're allowed to be lost. That's fine.
I think I'd have got lost if I wasn't reading it with the page. I mean, yeah, wonderful character. If it is a separate page.
Lois, you're currently muted, so those words of wisdom are flowing into the ether.
Right. Yeah, it's another one of those characters who says one thing to the person he's talking to and another to the audience and then back to him. You know, he has to be fairly polite to his master, but he obviously despises him. I mean, it's pretty much the same kind of thing as with Amoretto and Academico. I don't know if there's anybody who doesn't despise Amoretto, but we'll discover, I suppose.
Someone must love him.
Yeah.
If only his dear old dad.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's the Act 2 overall. For those who were here yesterday, does seem to have been the this passing of a baton, this sense of grasping at almost the edge of a plot, but then it doesn't happen. But it's mostly been Academico, Amoretto, and then Amoretto, this baton passing of double acts with a bit of additional business happening as well. We now skip to Act 3. I don't know if there's an interval of some description, possibly. More beers probably being drunk for Lynsey, who wasn't here the other day. The opening did suggest that the audience might be getting quite rowdy, so the performers do need to be on their toes with this. If these jokes aren't landing, they're in trouble. So let's hope it's witty and amusing. Anyway, Act 3, Scene 1, we enter Sir Raderick. A different page, we can be reasonably certain. This is Sir Raderick's page, whoever that is. We have a recorder and Immerito.
Signor Immerito, you remember my caution for the tithes and my promise for farming my tithes at such a rate?
Aye, and please your worship, sir.
You must put in security for the performance of it, in such sort as I and Master Recorder shall like of.
I will, and please your worship.
And because I will be sure that I have conferred this kindness upon a sufficient man, I have desired Master Recorder to take an examination over you.
My master, it seems, takes him for a thief, but he hath small reason for it. As for learning, it's plain he never stole any, and for the learning he knows himself how he comes by it. For let him but eat a mess of fermenti this 7 year, and yet he shall never be able to recover himself. Alas, poor sheep that hath fallen into the hands of such a fox.
Good Master Recorder, take your place by me and make trial of his gifts. Is the clerk there to record his examination? Oh, the page should serve the turn.
Trial of his gifts, never had any gifts a better trial. Why, Immerito, his gifts have appeared in as many colors as the rainbow, first to Master Amoretto in color of the satin suit he wears to my lady in the similitude of a loose gown, to my master in the likeness of a silver basin and ewer, to us pages in the semblance of new suits and points, so that Master Amoretto plays the gull in a piece of a parsonage. My master adorns his cupboard with a piece of a parsonage. My mistress upon good days puts on a piece of a parsonage, and we pages play at blow point for a piece of parsonage. I think here's trial enough for one man's gifts.
For as much as nature hath done her part in making you a handsome, likely man.
He's a handsome young man indeed, and hath a proper gelded parsonage.
In the next place, some art is requisite for the perfection of nature, for the trial whereof, at the request of my worshipful friend, I will in some sort propound questions fit to be resolved by one of your profession. Say, what is a parson that was never at the university?
A parson that was never in the university is a living creature that can eat a tithe pig.
Very well answered, but you should have added, and must be officious to his patron. Write down that answer to show his learning in logic.
Yea, boy, write that down very learnedly in good faith. I pray now, let me ask you one question that I remember. Whether is the masculine gender or the feminine more worthy?
The feminine, sir.
The right answer. In good faith, I have been of that mind always. Right, boy, that sure he is a grammarian.
No marvel my master be against the grammar, for he hath always made false Latin in the genders.
What university are you of?
Of none, sir.
He tells truth. To tell truth is an excellent virtue. Boy, make two heads, one for his learning and another for his virtues, and refer this to the head of his virtues, not of his learning.
What? Half a mess of good qualities referred to an ass's head.
Now, Master Recorder, if it please you, I will examine him in an author that will sound to him to the depth. A book of astronomy, otherwise called an almanac.
Very good, Sir Raderick. It were to be wished that there were no other book of humanity. Then there would not be such busy state-prying fellows as are nowadays. Proceed, good sir.
What is the Dominical letter?
C, sir. Please, your worship.
A very good answer. The very answer of the book. Write down that and refer to his skill in philosophy.
C, the Dominical letter. It is true, craft and cunning do so domineer, yet rather C and D are Dominical letters, that is crafty duncery.
I just want to pause midway through this because I'm enjoying this quite a lot. And I'm quite interested just making it clear what the game that is being played during this scene is. The form of testing his knowledge, but everybody's already been carefully paid off in advance so that they're going to praise him whatever the fool says. Is that the game? Is everybody in on that game, or are people trying to cover that up? It's weirdest Viver ever.
Or are they just so dumb they don't know that these are the wrong answers?
Yeah, I mean, so because that's the question. What is the game? Is it that they're all in on the game, or is it they're all ignorant of the actual thing? The only one who does know what's going on is the page who's sitting there going, "Yes, I will write all this down, regardless of what you want." Lynsey.
And is that also a bit the game of the last scene between Amoretto and his page, because the page has the soliloquy at the end of the last scene where he kind of says, this is what he's like, So the pages are showing astuteness, self-awareness, wit, all of these things, whereas the other characters are less so.
I think that, I imagine that a text like this is going to be youth centric in that sense. I think that's reasonable. Is everybody in on the game? Eric?
I was going to say that it feels a bit like, I don't know if you've seen this, there's this, one of the episodes from Blackadder that was used for comic relief, that isn't, the sort of charity ball thing. And it's Blackadder in the time of King Charles when he's about to be executed, and whatever anyone says, King Charles just goes, "Fascinating! Oh, absolutely fascinating!" And just sort of, they have that sort of catchphrase element where, Immerito says, "Oh, and please your worship," and Sir Raderick is, "A very good answer, and sort of, you kind of get the impression that it's very much that.
Actually, he says the very answer of the book. So that makes me wonder, have they actually got a book there with questions and answers in it?
Yeah, or are they just quietly changing it as they go along to move it forward? Lynsey, then Rachael.
I was just going to add to what Eric was saying, referencing Blackadder. I did think when I very quickly was looking at this before we started, I thought, okay, so I'll differentiate between Amoretto and the recorder by trying a Baldric type accent for the recorder. So very interesting. I wonder if those people read these things at Cambridge when they were at Cambridge, the Hugh Laurie and Stephen Fry and all those people. I wonder.
Yeah, because the other thing is, if they're all just corrupt, because they've all, this is basically money has changed hands, that, they're just doing what they've been told to do, certainly in terms of the recorder's side of things. Whereas Sir Raderick might just not know any better, because the page does sort of suggest that he doesn't know any better. He can still also be corrupt, but, wouldn't actually necessarily know the right answer if it hit them in the face. Rachael.
The page says that, what do you call it, that he made gifts of points to them, like enlisting all the gifts he made to people. Because he does say Immerito or all these guys' names are that I'm losing like how to pronounce them, but he says that he makes gifts to all these people that to Sir Roderick. He's gotten some like china or something from him. He's gotten some sort of dishes, and then to other people he's given stuff. But he gave the pages points or something. I'm looking at the thing and I can't find the words.
Well, it's because it's following on from Sir Raderick saying, let's make a trial of his gifts, as in his wit and knowledge, and Raderick's page is going, yeah, we've had quite a lot of them, as in bribes. So it does seem to be a play on that that's going on. That everybody gets something. Is that what's going on there, or have I just skimmed through it, Rachael?
Yeah, I think they've gotten physical. I think it's what you were saying, but I also meant like the physical gift. What is, because it says the physical gift that the pages have gotten, pages in the semblance of new suits and points. So suits, I'm assuming, is like clothing, but what are points and what is that reference?
I'll go to Lois.
Yeah, points were used to fasten the doublet to the hose, and there could be quite a lot of them, and it's one reason actually people who wore this sort of clothing had to have pages to unfasten them, because there were certain situations, you can probably guess which ones, in which these had to be undone. And so references to trussing one's points, that is fastening them up and untrussing and so on, quite often do have this further meaning of needing somebody to head to the loo with you to do all of this.
Yeah, as a young man, I was trussing up my groats as I wordled with a fair young maid. To quote the wonderful folk songs of Rambling Sid Rumpole. Someone's, I think, just put in the chat, does anyone want to talk about what a dominical letter actually is, as opposed to what Immerito just says? It's just going, pick a letter. C. I don't know how clever that joke is. I can understand that it's probably a clever joke, but actually I don't know what a dominical letter is. Anyone? Stephen?
It's incredibly complicated, but basically every day of the year gets given one of 7 or 8 letters. So it would be, is this A to G or whatever in the current sequence?
Oh, right.
What this has to do with anything in a Protestant country, I have no idea.
Yeah, I read the essay you sent. I mean, the bit of Wikipedia, and I still couldn't figure it out. I mean, I've no idea how they would have known what the dominical letter was.
Lynsey.
Is it basically a way of asking what day of the week is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's
But
a way of
nobody would
asking.
probably know.
Yeah. Yes. If you didn't know the day of the week, whereas this is a bit more complicated and asking you to know that, and just pick one. He picks a letter. Anyway, it was a good question, Stephen.
I was just going to say you could do a version of that now where you could just say, well, what is the astrological import of today? And somebody would go, oh, it's Aries with Pisces in the 4th quadrant, and nobody would know.
Lovely. So we have more questions to go. They've got the book. So Raderick, I think, is next. Has another question relating to months.
How many days hath September?
30 days hath September, April, June, and November. February hath 28 alone, and all the rest hath 30 and 1.
Very learnedly in good faith, yet also smacking poetry. Write that down, boys. To show his learning in poetry. How many miles from Walton to London?
12, sir.
How many from Newmarket to Grantham?
10, sir.
Without doubt in his days he hath been some carrier's horse.
How call you him that is cunning in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the cipher?
A good arithmetician.
Write down that answer of his to show his learning in arithmetic.
He must needs be a good arithmetician that counted money so lately.
When is the new moon?
The last quarter, the 5th day at 2 of the clock and 38 minutes in the morning.
Write him down. How call you him that is weatherwise?
A good astronomer.
Sir, boy, write him down for a good astronomer.
As colit astra.
What day of the month lies the Queen's Day on?
17th of November.
Boy, refer this to his virtues and write him down a good subject.
Faith, he were an excellent subject for 2 or 3 good whips. He would make a fine ass for an ape to ride upon.
And these shall suffice for the parts of his learning. Now it remains to try whether you be a man of good utterance, that is, whether you can ask for the straight heifer with the wide face. I've also tried the boys in the belfry and bid the sexton whip out dogs. Let nice hear your voice.
If any man or woman.
That's too high.
If any man or woman.
That's too low.
If any man or woman can tell any tidings of a horse with 4 feet, 2 cares that did stray about the 7th hour, 3 minutes in the forenoon of the 5th day.
He talks of a horse just as if it were the eclipse of the moon.
Boy, write him down for a good utterance. My Maester Recorder, I think he hath been examined sufficiently.
Aye, Sir Raderick, 'tis so. We have tried him very thoroughly.
Aye, we have taken an inventory of his good parts and prized them accordingly.
Signor Immerito, for as much as we have made a double trial of thee, the one of your learning, the other of your erudition, it is expedient also in the next place to give you a few exhortations, considering the greatest clerics are not the wisest men. Therefore, this is therefore first to exhort you to abstain from controversies. Secondly, not to gird at men of worship such as myself, but to use your wit discreetly. Thirdly, not to speak when any man or woman coughs. Do so, and in so doing, I will persevere to be your worshipful friend and loving patron.
I thank your worship. You have been the deficient cause of my preferment.
Lead Immerito into my son, and let him dispatch him. And remember, my tithes to be reserved, paying 12 pence a year. I'm going to Moorfields to speak with an unthrift I should meet at the Middle Temple about a purchase. When you have done, follow us.
And exit Immerito and the page. So yeah, that progressed quite nicely, didn't it? Going from things that are just commonplaces that anyone really should know to I mean, I quite like the fact that there is an early modern version of the rhyme to know the lengths of the month. I like to know that it's very similar to the kind of thing that we have today. That pleases me. That pleases me. Nice. I have to say, just did take a moment to just check. I thought that is right. So yeah, there's some really nice stuff. He talks of a horse just as if it were the eclipse of the moon. The page is really nicely placed there, and you shouldn't speak when any man or woman coughs. Very very wise, wise Sir Raderick there. Yeah, it's a nice little sketch, that actually. I think that works quite nicely. Thoughts from the room? Stephen.
You could play Immerito as a kind of cheeky chappy. Might work better. I think the sort of character that Eric Idle used to do a lot with Monty Python, who just sort of rattles off any old rubbish. Completely, he's a kind of spiv character. He's sort of he's a kind of Del Boy figure. And in other words, he's got the patter, as opposed to the way I was trying to do it, which to make everything sound like it was dug up from the depths of his stupidity.
Yeah, because that's the thing, is that just because they're sort of effectively teaching to test here, they're basically feeding him stuff and they don't care what it is. So, or he could be a sort of one of a sporting scholarship here. He knows he's not here for learning. He knows it's all arranged. So yeah, I think there is a span actually as to how Immerito is supposed to be portrayed. Actually, it's his answers that are stupid. It doesn't necessarily mean that's where he's actually coming from. Lois.
Yeah, I mean, some of those questions are really extremely simple, and he is actually, they're so simple that he gets them right, like the Queen's Accession Day, 17th of November, and of course the rhyme about the number of days in each month. I suppose it reminds me, I know there's a quiz program that I used to hear. I think Groucho Marx did it. And at the end, if somebody had managed to get no points, whatever, he would then be asked something like, who is buried in Grant's tomb? And, the answer is obviously Grant. And so so the person would go away with $100 or something. It seems to me it's a bit like that. They're getting to the point where the questions are very, very basic.
Mm. Okay, we'll go on to what is effectively a continuation of the scene. So Raderick and the recorder are now left by themselves. Let's find out whether they're going to give us any clues about actually their motivations during the previous scene, or whether they're going to be playing some other game. I'm interested in this sort of treating this play now as sort of hunt the game. What's the game that's being played? Sir Raderick and recorder.
Hark you, Master Recorder. I have fleshed my prodigal boy notably, and let him deal for his living that hath done him much good, I assure you.
You do well, Sir Roderick, to bestow your living upon such a one as will be content to share, and on Sunday to say nothing. Whereas your proud university princox thinks he is a man of such merit, the world cannot sufficiently endow him with preferment. An unthankful viper that will sting the man that revived him. Why, it's not strange to see a ragged clerk, some start-up weaver, or some butcher's son, that scrubbed of late within a sleeveless gown, when the commencement, like a morris dance, hath put a bell or two about his legs, created him a sweet, clean gentleman. How then he 'gins to follow fashions, he whose thin sire dwells in a smoky roof, must take tobacco and must wear a lock. His thirsty dad drinks in a wooden bowl, but his sweet self is served in a silver plate. His hungry sire will scrape you 20 legs for one good Christmas meal on New Year's Day. But his maw must be capen crammed each day. He must ere long be triple beneficed, else with his tongue he'll thunderbolt the world and shake each peasant by his deaf man's ear. But had the world no wiser men than I, we'd pen the prating parrots in a cage, a chair, a candle, and a tinderbox. A thatched chamber and a ragged gown should be their lands and whole possessions. Knights, lords, and lawyers should be logged and dwell within those over-stately heaps of stone, which doting sires in old age did erect. Well, it were to be wished that never a scholar in England might have above £40 a year.
Faith, Master Recorder, if it went by wishing, there should never one of them all have above 20 a year. A good stipend, Master Recorder. In the meantime, howsoever I hate them all deadly, yet I am fain to give them good words. So they are pestilent fellows, they speak nothing but bodkins and piss vinegar. Well, do what I can in outward kindness to them, yet they do nothing but bewray my house. As there was one that made a couple of knavish verses on my country chimney now in the time of my sojourning here at London. And it was thus. Sir Raderick keeps no chimney cavalier that takes tobacco above once a year. And another made a couple of verses on my daughter that learns to play on the viol da gamba. Her viol da gamba is her best content, for twixt her legs she holds her instrument. Very knavish if you look into it, Master Recorder. Nay, they have played many a knavish trick beside with me. Well, 'tis a shame indeed there should be any such privilege for proud beggars as Cambridge and Oxford are. But let them go, and if ever they light in my hands, if I do not plague them, let me never return home again to see my wife's waiting maid.
This scorn of knights is too egregious. But how should these young colts prove amblers when the old heavy gold jades do trot? There shall you see a puny boy start up and make a theme against common lawyers. Then the old unwieldy camels 'gin to dance, this fiddling boy playing a fit of mirth. The grey-beards scrub and laugh and cry, good, good, to them again. Boy scourge the barbarians. But we may give the losers leave to talk. We have the coin. Then tell them, laugh for me. Yet knights and lawyers hope to see the day when we may share here their possessions and make indentures of their chaffered skins, dice of their bones to throw in merriment.
Oh, good faith, Master Recorder, if I could see that day once.
Well, remember another day what I say. Scholars are pried into of late and are found to be busy fellows, disturbers of the peace. I'll say no more. Guess at my meaning. I smell a rat.
I hope at length England will be wise enough. I hope so, thy faith. Then an old knight may have his wench in a corner without any satyrs or epigrams. But the day is far spent, Master Recorder, and I fear by this time the unthrift is arrived at the place appointed in Moorfields. Let us hasten to him.
Indeed, this day's subject transported us too late. I think we shall not come much too late.
And they exit. Some interesting things going on here of, don't want these scholars, don't want them they need keeping in their place. I had a scholar come around the other day. He just wrote this naughty joke, which just seems to be really just a way of crowbarring into slightly naughty gags in. There's some really interesting, weird things going on here. Thoughts from the room, Lois?
I mean, I think people have wondered what exactly that bit about scholars are pried into of late, and this sounds really rather sinister. There may be some arrests soon, something like that. They're found to be disturbers of the peace. They may be in some kind of plot. I mean, who knows? It's interesting, but I think also that there is a sort of almost seeing both sides of it for once in that bit about how they're such proud fellows. They always think nothing is good enough for them. I mean, that is actually generally true of academics. I mean, I had a colleague in Leicester who used to quote a line by some obscure writer about the scholar's melancholy, which is emulation, and sort of envy, jealousy, that kind of thing. And I think they're sort of getting at that as well, even though most of it is, of course, just an excuse for showing that they deserve all this satire.
Yes, and especially when they're talking about, we want to get back to doing all those things that what we don't want is all these people coming on asking questions about what we do with our lives, and awkward things about scholars. They keep asking questions.
Yeah.
Terrible. And it also sort of reads as also just the youth as well, the generation, the young. Even though that's not explicitly what's being said, that just sort of feels like that might be part of it. I could be wrong there. Eric?
Also, it seems to be implied that the people examining the scholars don't actually have any qualifications or learning of any kind, or is outdated. I don't know.
It's also just the nature of the recorder, who presumably has some education, but clearly doesn't like the people who have had more education, or is there's something about the vehemence and also just the weirdness of how it's laid out as well. I think someone pointed out, we suddenly go into blank verse midway through the recorder. And these things, different things are going on. Any other thoughts, Lois?
Yeah, there's probably some sort of class thing here. I mean, the recorder really objects to this social mobility. The scholar whose father had pretty much nothing, who then, once he's got a degree and gets some sort of job, is really moving out of his class and presumably looking down on people like the recorder. I mean, there's a sort of town and gown thing going on here too, I think. Which probably was going on all the time in Cambridge. I mean, it was even when I was there.
Rachael, and then we'll move on.
What is a town and gown?
Oh, hostility between the academics in a university town like Oxford or Cambridge and the citizens, the city officials and shopkeepers and just everybody who isn't in the university.
And there was a much more closed universe within the university life at the time. It wasn't quite a separate police state, but it did function in quite administratively different ways. So when students got rowdy, the town could get quite annoyed because they didn't necessarily have the same powers to punish them as
They were disciplined by the university, and it was still true. I mean, I think it's still true. I mean, when I was there, this was the early 60s, you had to wear a gown on the streets after dark, and a lot of students preferred to go out without their gown. Then there were these people called proctors who were sort of employed by the university. They were not academics, but they would go up to someone and say, "Are you a member of this university?" Whereupon the student without a gown would run like mad and finally climb over the walls of some college to get in because they could be fined for being in the street without the gown. I mean, it was that kind of thing. They had to be disciplined by university officials, not by people in the town who probably couldn't care less anyway whether they were wearing gowns or not.
Okay, we will continue with we return to Amoretto and finally the meeting. Amoretto meets Immerito. I think they've been on stage at the same time, but I don't think they've properly interacted. And we also have Amoretto's page And I think that's it for this scene. So let's see how that all flows. Immerito, by the way, is booted.
Master Immerito, deliver this letter to the poser in my father's name. Merry withal some sprinkling, verbum satienti sat est. Farewell, Master Immerito.
I thank your worship most heartily.
Lois.
Am I?
Yes.
Oh, I see. This is different from that other page. I thought, okay.
Yeah. We had figured out that it probably was the same page,
Yeah.
but you're technically down as Immerito.
Yeah. Is it not a shame to see this old dunce learning his induction at these years? Let him go. I lose nothing by him, for I'll be sworn, but for the booty of selling the parsonage, I should have gone in my old clothes this Christmas. A dunce, I see, is a neighbor-like brute beast. A man may live by him.
And Amoretto seems to make verse.
A pox on it, my muse is not so witty as she was wont to be. Her nose is like, not yet. Plague on these mathematics. They have spoiled my brain in making verse.
Hang me if he have any more mathematics than will serve to count the clock or tell the meridian hour by rumbling of his paunch.
Her nose is like
cobbler's shoeing horn.
Her nose is like a beauteous marrowbone.
Marry, a sweet, snotty mistress.
Faith, I do not like it yet. Ass as I was to read a piece of Aristotle in Greek yesternight, it had put me out of my English vein quite.
Oh, monstrous lie. Let me be a point trusser while I live, if he understands any tongue but English.
Sarah boy, remember me when I come into Paul's churchyard to buy a ronsard and du bartas in French and aretine in Italian, and our hardest writers in Spanish. They will sharpen my wits gallantly. I do relish these tongues in some sort. Oh, now I do remember I heard a report of a poet newly come out in Hebrew. It is a pretty harsh tongue and doth relish a gentleman traveller. But come, let's haste after my father. The fields are fitter for heavenly meditations.
Exit, leaving Amoretto's page.
My masters, I could wish your presence at an admirable jest. Why, presently this great linguist, my master, will march through Paul's churchyard, come to a bookbinder's shop, and with a big Italian look and a Spanish face, ask for these books in Spanish and Italian. Then, turning through his ignorance the wrong end of the book upward, use action on this unknown tongue after this sort. First, look on the title and wrinkle his brow. Next, make as though he read the first page and bites a lip. Then, with his nail, score the margin as though there were some notable conceit. And lastly, when he thinks he hath gulled the standers-by sufficiently, throws the book away in a rage, swearing that he could never find books of a true print since he was lost in Padua, inquires after the next mart, and so departs. And so must I, for by this time his contemplation is arrived at his mistress' nose end, and he is as brag as if he had taken Ostend. By this time he begins to spit and cry, "Boy, carry my cloak." And now I go to attend on his worship.
And exit the page. Yes, some nice little bits of business there. Nothing too developed, but nice little stuff going on. I'm liking this description of Paul's churchyard, which was an important book buying area, as well as doing an awful lot of other stuff. Obviously, Paul's was quite different then. They had a different cathedral, and the precincts were quite different to what we have today. So yeah, it's nice to have that little pen portrait, not only of him, but also a sense of the the people he'd be interacting with. And yeah, trying to create poetry.
Yes.
It's a nice little bit. Lois.
Yeah, I was interested a bit about him scoring the margin with his nail. I haven't heard of that before. People usually, of course, make marks with pencil or pen, but I suppose if you don't have anything with you, just, I mean, the sort of paper they used, or parchment, well, it wouldn't be parchment, but it must have been thick enough that you could do that.
Yes, because it's this acting that he does there of picks up a book and looks and does all the things, and then just finds an excuse to shout about it and not buy it, having marked the merchandise.
Yes.
Rachael.
When he says true print, what does that mean? Like, is it that he would be saying this wasn't a book that, this was a book that was published but wasn't fit for publication, or something that they had put out and were selling in the bookshop? Is that the implication as to why, is that what does that mean?
Well, I was taking it that it's just not a very good edition. I've seen a better edition when I was somewhere else, but it could have other variations on that sort of thing. Any excuse to say not to buy the book, basically.
Yeah.
And the quality of printing did vary enormously. I mean, that's the thing, that you can make that criticism of books. And other print material that was available. Okay, we will crack on as we have another scene with Ingenioso. When did we last see Ingenioso? It's been a while. Writer extraordinary. Was he still working on his Cuckolds of Cambridge? That was what he was. Yes, the Chronicle of Cambridge Cuckolds was his the commission he managed to get last time. So we have Ingenioso, Furor, and a Phantasma enter at some point.
Come, lads, this wine whets your resolution in our design. It's a needy world with subtle spirits, and there's a gentleman-like kind of begging that may beseem poets in this age.
Now by the wing of nimble Mercury, by my Thalia's silver-sounding harp, by that celestial fire within my brain that gives a living genius to my lines, howe'er my dulled intellectual capers less nimbly than it did afore, yet will I play a hunts up to my muse, and make her mount from out her sluggish nest, as high as is the highest sphere in heaven. Awake, you paltry trolls of Helicon, or by this light I'll swagger with you straight. You grandsire Phoebus, with your lovely eye, the firmament's eternal vagabond, the heavens' prompter that doth peep and pry into the acts of mortal tennis balls. Inspire me straight with some rare delicies, or dismount thee from thy radiant coach, or I'll dismount thee from thy radiant coach, and make thee a poor cutchy here on earth.
Curisoriga paterni.
Nay, prithee, good sure, do not roar in rhymes before thy time. Thou hast a very terrible roaring muse. Nothing but squibs and fireworks. Quiet thyself a while and hear thy charge.
Okay, this heck. Animo concipe dicta tuo.
Let us on to our device, our plot, our project. That old Sir Raderick, the new printed compendium of all iniquity that hath not aired his country chimney once in 3 winters. He that loves to live in an odd corner here in London and affect an odd wench in a nook, the one that loves to live in a narrow room that he may with more facility in the dark light upon his wife's waiting maid, the one that loves the life short sermon and a long play, one that goes to a play to a whore to his bed in a circle, good for nothing in the world but to sweat nightcaps and foul fair lawn shirts, feed a few foggy serving men, and prefer dunces to livings. This old Sir Raderick, Furor, it shall be thy task to cudgel with thy thick thwack terms. Marry at the first, give him some sugar candy terms, and then if he will not untie the purse strings of his liberality, sting him with terms laid in aquafortis and gunpowder.
Inua fert animus mutatus dicere format. The servile current of my sliding verse gently shall run into his thick-skinned ears, where it shall dwell like a magnifico, command his slimy sprite to honour me for my high tiptoe strutting poesy. But if his star hath favoured him so ill as to debar him by his dunghill thoughts justly to esteem my verse's towering pitch, if his earth-rooting snout shall gin to scorn my verse that giveth immortality, then bella per Imathios.
Jurorama ministrat.
I'll shake his heart upon my verse's point, rip out his guts with rhyming poignard, quarter his credit with a bloody quill.
Scalpellum calami, atramentum charter libelli sunt semper studius arma parata tuis.
Enough, Furor. We know thou art a nimble swagger with a goose quill. Now for you, Phantasma, leave trussing your points and listen.
Omne tulit punctum.
Mark you, Amoretto, Sir Broderick's son, to him shall thy piping poetry and sugar ends of verse be directed. He is one that will draw out this pocket glass hence in a walk, thrice in a walk, one that dreams in a night of nothing but musk and civet and talks of nothing all day long but his hawk, his hound, and his mistress, one that more admires the good wrinkle of a boot or the curious crinkling of a silk stocking than all the wit in the world. One that loves no scholar but him whose tired ears can endure half a day together, his fly-blown sonnets of his mistress and her loving pretty creatures, her monkey and her puppet. It shall be thy task, Phantasma, to cut this gull's throat with fair turn, and if he hold fast for all thy juggling rhetoric, fall at defiance with him and the poking stick he wears.
Simul extulit ensem.
Come, brave imps, gather up your spirits and let's march on like adventurous knights and discharge 100th poetical spirits upon them.
Est deus in nobis adjutante calescimus illo.
Exeunt. Poets assemble. So Raderick had a point in that earlier scene of going, these people keep sending me this scurrilous verse and they won't let me do anything. And, I'm starting to feel on his side because these guys, this is a prolonged trolling campaign that they are planning here. They're really going to go for him. They're a bit. They seem to be possibly just a little worse for wear during this scene. But yeah, it does seem. Plan in progress. They're going to cudgel with thy thick thwack terms. Thoughts, Lois?
Yeah, it's a bit repetitive too, isn't it? I mean, as far as I can make out, Ingenioso is basically asking both of them to do the same thing. I mean, start out being relatively flattering to Sir Raderick, and then if that doesn't work, then just, all the vituperation they can muster will be just great.
Yeah, be nice. Give us money and we'll write nice things. Don't give us money. The nice things get nasty. They can get nasty. It's a bit of a form of blackmail. Yeah. Stephen.
It reminded me a bit of that scene in The Big Lebowski where Donnie keeps on trying to interject stuff Phantasma is like Donny trying to get a word in edgeways. It's kind of like, because he's talking Latin, so everyone's ignoring him. He keeps saying these things. And also the Latin, I don't usually do any prep, but when the entire scene, every line is in Latin, I did kind of feel like, and half of this is just bits out of grammar books. It's not, and random, completely random Ovid quotations. I think one of them actually makes sense dramatically. The rest of it is kind of rubbish. So he's been given rubbish in another language to speak.
I do wonder if he's supposed to just be drunk and just randomly saying things. So that's sort of how I was reading it, because it is just sort of Dadaist Latin.
It's a joke for the audience, isn't it? It's nothing to do with the characters on stage.
Lois.
Yeah, I think all that quotation from Latin grammars is you get it everywhere. I think because they did so much of that in school, and it was just run into the ground. They had to memorize, I think, a distich every day. That's 2 lines of verse. And they had to memorize all these examples from the grammar. And I think that stuck with them forever. So probably everybody recognizes these things, but they really are incredibly basic ones. I mean, I remember being amazed to see Nash quoting, I think in connection with Sir Philip Sidney, Arma virumque cano, which is the opening of the Aeneid. I mean, it's one thing everybody knows, arms on the man I sing. And it was just such an absurd thing to be throwing in there.
Eric, did you wave?
Yeah, no, I was just going to mention that I just like the elaborate lists. I don't understand why, like, he's fixated on, like, sort of all the elements of these people's personality, like, sort of, for Amoretto, it's just, like, sort of, talks nothing of all day long, his hound, his mistress, and the one that more admires the good wrinkle of a boot, and sort of just, like, this long list of things that piss him off, basically. It's kind of, and I like the idea that this is, like, scholars or poets' revenge. It's like the way they can kind of fight back against privilege. Well, I can't say the other word yet.
Anyway, we are, next scene, believe it or not, returning to our principal characters. Do you remember when all this started 2.5 plays ago? It used to be mostly about Studioso and Philomusus, and they've sort of got lost in the, I'm starting to think of them as the stars in a franchise that they can't really afford to get in for the whole film. It's like they're too busy now. They can only come in for a couple of scenes. The rest of the time they're off doing another thing now. So that's how I'm seeing what's going on here. But anyway, we have a scene with Studioso and Philomusus. Let's see where they're at.
Oh, Philomusus, we never escaped so fair a scouring. Why, yonder are pursuance out for the French doctor, and the lodging bespoken for him and his man in Newgate. It was a terrible fear that made us cast our hair.
Philomusus may be wrestling with a dog at this precise moment in time.
And canst thou sport at our calamities, and countest us happy to scape imprisonment? Why, the wide world that blesseth some with wail is to our chained thoughts a darksome gale. Ow.
Nay, pretty friend, these wanted terms for go. He doubles grief that comments on a wall.
Why do fond men term it impiety to send a wearisome, sad, grudging ghost unto his home, his long and lasting home? Or let them make our life less grievous be, or suffer us to end our misery?
Oh no, the sentinel his watch must keep until his lord do license him to sleep.
It's time to sleep within our hollow graves and rest us in the darksome womb of earth. Dead things are graved, and bodies are no less, pinned and forlorn like ghostly carcasses.
Not long this tap of loathed life can run, soon cometh death, and then our woe is done. Meantime, good Philomusus, be content. Let's spend our days in hopeful merriment.
Cursed be our thoughts whene'er they dream of hope. Banned be those haps that hence flatter us. When mischief dogs are still and still for aye, from our first birth until our burying day, in our first gamesome age, our doting sires carked and cared to have us lettered, sent us to Cambridge, where our oil is spent. Us our kind college from the teat did tear, and forced us walk before we weaned were. From that time since I wandered have we still in the wide world, urged by our forced will, nor ever have we happy fortune tried. Then why should hope with our rent state abide? Nay, let us run unto the baleful cave, pite in the hollow ribs of craggy cliff, where dreary owls do shrike the live long night, chasing away the birds of cheerful light, where yawning ghosts do howl in ghastly wise, where the dull, hollow-eyed, that staring sire, yclept despair hath his sad mansion. Him let us find, and by his counsel we will end our too much irked misery.
To wail by haps argues a dastard mind.
To hear too long argues an ass's kind.
Long since the worst chance of the die was cast.
But why should that word so long time last?
Why doth now these sleepy plains commence?
But why should I e'er be dulled with patience?
Wise folk do bear what struggling cannot mend.
Good spirits must with thwarting fates contend.
Some hope is left our fortunes to redress.
No hope but this, ere to be comfortless.
Our lives remainder gentler hearts may find.
The gentlest hearts to us will prove unkind.
And they exit. So, yeah, to recap, their con went wrong. They are on the run from that. They're sad. I mean, we're not really, shall we say, in this plot terms, that far away from where we were yesterday with the last session, because basically that's what they did. They came on and went, yeah, we're reduced to this, we are sad. It feels like this is primarily for some stylistic spoof material kind of thing, that it's doing some deliberate literary parody that I am only partially aware of, because it's got that thing, long speech and then conversational rhyming lines that is very like quite a few plays that we've done. I don't know if there's a specific text in mind. Lois?
Well, Eric was first.
Eric.
I was just going to mention that it is very Tancred and Gismunda, Misfortunes of Arthur, all that stuff, where you've got like the long speeches and then like it's a debate play basically. And then rhyming.
Yeah. Lois?
I think it's the same thing we saw yesterday. That is, you get to the end of the act and they come on as the chorus, really. And they're saying pretty much the same thing. I mean, except that this time they're talking about suicide. I mean, it's a debate. And I think it's very traditional. I mean, that image of the sentinel having to stand there until he's relieved, because I've seen that elsewhere. And in fact, there's a bit that Graham Greene quotes from Dryden, which he obviously liked very much. Brutus and Cato might discharge their souls and give them furloughs for another world. But we, like sentries, are compelled to stand in starless nights and wait the appointed hour, which is actually a much better way of putting it than this, but it's the same idea. I mean, can't we commit suicide? I mean, life is worthless, life is meaningless. No, religion tells us we've got to stand until we're discharged. I mean, they're even more depressed, in other words, than they were yesterday, but they are, first they have the speeches, then they have the Sticomythia, and it does seem to be drawing on, classical conventions.
I was just wondering if anyone picked up on anything specific, that it could be anything, couldn't it? Rachael?
I don't know if it's necessarily about this scene, but Philomusus and Studioso coming in for only a bit in this made me realize that their dad, I don't think, has been in this play. Their dad/uncle hasn't been in this play yet.
Yes, in all the other plays, it was a case of I am sending you off to university, and the other one going, I hope they've not wasted their time at university because the farm's dead in the water and they've got nothing to come back to. So they better have made a decent fist of their lives. Maybe there'll be a last minute turn up. Who knows? We have got one more scene as we go into Act 4, just to whet our appetites for next time. And this is where Lois swaps to being Amoretto briefly, and Lynsey retains the recorder. And don't play Frere Jacques on it, just because you can. Act 4, Scene 1, Sir Raderick and Prodigo at one corner of the stage, recorder and Amoretto at the other. 2 pages are scoring of tobacco pipes.
Master Prodigo, Master Recorder has told young Law, your land is forfeited. And for me not to take the forfeiture were to break the Queen's law. For mark you, it's the Queen's law, and to break the Queen's law is not to be a good subject. And I mean to be a good subject. Besides, I am the Justice of the Peace, and being Justice of the Peace, I must do justice. That is the law, that is to take the forfeiture, especially having taken notice of it. Marry, Master Prodigo, here are a few shillings over and besides the bargain.
That pox on your shillings. Splat a while ago before he had me in the lurch. Over my cousin Prodigo. You are welcome, my cousin Prodigo. Take my cousin Prodigo's horse. A cup of wine for my cousin Prodigo. Good faith, you shall sit here, good cousin Prodigo. A clean trencher for my cousin Prodigo. Have a special care of my cousin Prodigo's lodging. Now, Master Prodigo with a pox and a few shillings for vantage. A plague on your shillings. Pox on your shillings. Were not for the sergeant which jogs me at my heels. A plague on your shillings. Pox on your shillings. Pox on yourself and your shillings. Pox on your worship if I catch thee at Ostend. I dare not stay for the sergeant.
And we can infer that Prodigo might exit around about there.
Good faith, Master Prodigo is an excellent fellow. He takes the Cuban ebullition so excellently.
He's a good liberal gentleman. He hath bestowed an ounce of tobacco upon us, and as long as it lasts, come cut and long tail, we'll spend it liberally for his sake.
Come, fill the pipe quickly, while my master is in his melancholic humor. It's just the melancholy of a collier's horse.
If you cough, Jack, after your tobacco, for a punishment you shall kiss the pantoffle.
It's a foul oversight that a man of worship cannot keep a wench in his house. But there must be muttering and surmising. It was the wisest saying that my father ever uttered, that a wife was the name of necessity, not of pleasure. For what do men marry for but to stock their ground, and to have one to look to the linen, sit at the upper end of the table and carve up a capon, one that can wear a hood like a hawk and cover up her foul face with the fan. But there's no pleasure always to be tied to a piece of mutton. Sometimes a mess of stewed broth will do well, and an unlaced rabbit is best of all. Well, for mine own part, I have no great cause to complain, for I'm provided of 3 bouncing wenches that are mine own fee simple. One of them I'm presently to visit, if I can rid myself cleanly of this company without bewraying. Let me see how the day goes. Precious coals, the time is at hand. I must meditate on an excuse to be gone.
Which I say is grounded on the statute I spake of before, enacted in the reign of Henry VI.
It's a plain case, whereon I mooted in our temple, and that was this. Put case there be 3 brethren, John a Noakes, John a Nash, and John a Style. John a Noakes the elder, John a Nash the younger, John a Style the youngest of all. John and Nash the younger dieth without issue of his body lawfully begotten. Whether shall his lands ascend to John and Oakes the elder, or descend to John Estow the youngest of all? The answer is, the lands do collaterally descend, not ascend.
Very true. And for a proof hereof, I will show you a place in Littleton, which is very pregnant with this point.
And there we're going to pause. I say it was more a taster for what's to come next time, to sort of get that into our system a little bit, of that sense of this room full of people having conversations, and how different people are throwing things up. Prodigo's interesting. I quite liked Prodigo. Prodigo had some issues. I don't know if that was entirely out of Stephen's marvelous performance, or I like the circular logic of Sir Raderick's opening bit. That has a nice circularity to it, though Sir Raderick gets increasingly less amusing as he goes on. And I just like the fact you've got the pages sitting there trying to clean out tobacco pipes and fill them with and get them ready. As you know, tobacco is becoming the in thing, and people are learning, of course, that there's a certain amount of maintenance that is required, even with if there are your more disposable pipe, but it does seem that this is the less so. Thoughts in the room, Lois?
Well, apropos of the pipes, I went to a recording of Upstart Crow, and you may remember that always ends with a couple of people smoking long clay pipes. And apparently that particular bit is always filmed rather than done live, precisely because the pipes keep going out and having to be refilled. It would just be too much of a mess to try to do in a live recording.
Yeah. Rachael?
Yeah, question about that. Is that because the first tobacco pipes, like, they just didn't know how to make them and keep them alight at first? So, like, were those clay pipes that you saw, were they supposed to be like accurate to the period or something, or was there?
I think so. They were quite long, long stems, and then a base to them. I don't know. I mean, I've never smoked, and I don't know anything about the business of keeping those things from going out.
Basically, from my experience and people I've known, they're just to go out. It's just what they do. I mean, keeping a pipe actually lit, unless you're continually puffing away at it, it will tend to just go out. And then when you want to clean the damn thing, it's a nightmare. It's actually it's more a nightmare if you don't do it regularly, and you don't do it thoroughly regularly, otherwise, because it can get clogged very easily. But if it's a clay pipe, then basically it's fairly disposable, because it's going to break pretty damn quickly. But that's what you give your page to do, or more importantly, it's what you give pages to a business to do if they're on stage. It gives an actor a job. It's a prop. It's the drinks cabinet. It gives people business. Okay, we are into final thoughts as we're into extra time. And yeah, for those who've been with us for much of the journey, a sense of where we are with this one. This is much more sketchy than the previous two. They've been getting sketchier as they're going along, that you've got a sort of running gag. You've got a series of characters we're diving into, but it's really that question of what's the game at any one moment, what's the gag at any one moment, because otherwise there isn't much to hang your hat on. How are we finding it? How's it running for us? Stephen, you were enjoying it yesterday. How are you finding the show so far today?
It's okay, isn't it? I mean, it's the sort of thing where you just have to kind of not really worry that there's a play in there anywhere. I think if you're kind of approaching it from wanting there to be a kind of structure and characters you could get along with, I think you'd be kind of disappointed. So it's kind of like a review, as you say. I was wondering about that last character. Unless they're in the other plays, that's it. They come on, they sort of say plague and pox for 5 lines, and they go off again. And I wondered if that might be. I know you can go too far in this kind of thing, but if these are plays put on for a particular audience, then maybe this is explicable as a real person who they're mimicking, because there does seem to be some care to create a sort of a particular mini language there. And I don't know if this is something throughout the plays more generally. Is there a sort of acclay element to them, or is this just, they know somebody who can do a very good sort of Angry of Chatham, and they go, well, we'll have to get that in somewhere.
Yeah, it might explain it, because you're right. It doesn't turn up. I don't think turns up again tomorrow, and I don't think we've met him before in any of these. And maybe it is just a one moment gag that they've just thrown in. That it's the kind of thing that this person does in the senior common room or something. I'll go to Lois.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing that does happen in, I think, almost any kind of amateur effort that's being thrown together hastily. You find some guy who's a wonderful character and everybody would love to get him in the play, but he's terribly busy, so he can do one scene, so you write in a bit for him. The Prodigal is prepared for, because you keep getting Sir Roderick, I think, saying he's got to go off and meet this prodigal or the spendthrift somewhere. But it's such a small role. I don't know. It seems to me it's there obviously is a certain amount of continuity, but I would imagine that if this was kind of like an end of term review, nobody had time to be at all the rehearsals, and that's why it's so bitty.
Lois, do you have any additional thoughts, final thoughts at that there?
Well, as usual, I've been enjoying it, though, for all the for reasons that might not altogether work in a production, but it's partly just all the information about various sorts of practice in the period, and and the usual stuff about academic life and how sad it is to be a scholar, and what difficult people scholars are, and how they all think that having got a degree they're going to get wonderful jobs, and they aren't, and then they hate everybody.
Greg only popped in, able to pop in for this one. Any final thoughts?
No, really good. Really like the bit of this page I got. Looking forward to tomorrow. So we'll be here. Yes. No, it'll be good.
You get to be Ingenioso and Burbage tomorrow. So yeah, more meta period jokes. I'm sure coming up now. Next time, Lynsey stepped in at the deep end. I don't know how many of these Parnassuses you've been able to pop in for. I don't think you've caught any of them, have you?
Parnassus.
Yeah.
I think like Lois, I'm sort of enjoying it as a text. I'm not sure about a performance. It struck me just now that it is a bit like a pantomime, as in that there's very, very thin plot, it seems. There isn't really a lot of plot or action. There's an awful lot of sort of extended gags and games and jokes and potentially set pieces perhaps that, we don't know, but it just seems to be that kind of beast at the moment. Obviously I wasn't here yesterday, and I haven't I'm not very familiar with these, but it's quite fun coming to it cold.
Rachael, any final thoughts? You've been here for pretty much all of them, I think.
I feel like this one, because there was some talk about the structure of it, the like jokes with the blank verse, and then the switching into the blank verse today, and then even that last scene, all the characters, they keep repeating these phrases, but they're doing them in different ways. Like Prodigo, it seems like he's repeating all these words, like because he's angry, and it's like one of those things where you get stuck on one thing when you're angry, and he's doing whatever. Raderick seems like, even though he's repeating all these words repeating these phrases, that it's like he's doing it in a certain way, and then the last time Lois's character, was it one of the pages where they're repeating the John Nash, the John this, the John that? That's something you could play with, like the timing and the comedy with all those, and you know what I mean. It's I don't know. I feel like this one is sketches. Maybe they couldn't get all the people together to rehearse it, or maybe it was just they were experimenting a lot with this one, like in terms of form.
Eric, any final thoughts?
I was gonna say maybe some of them had graduated and were already living a life of crime by this point. I don't know. I was here for the first one and then missed the second one, so it's a bit hazy. But I don't know. It's just there's where we go. Yes, it's all fun and games, and then you reach like Sir Raderick going, "Yes, women are like food." It just felt a bit disturbing to read that. I don't know. There are some great lines though, and some great insults in there. Just like sort of, yeah.
Yeah, but luckily, I don't think the play's on Sir Raderick's side. I'm not getting the impression that you're supposed to recommend him for the Royal Society.
Yeah. I think I did like the sort of, he's in his melancholic humor, but it's just the melancholy of a collier's horse. It doesn't matter.
Well, we have only one more session on Parnassus to go, and then we will have done all three texts and have got an overview of the Uber text. So the final answers will be had next time. Till then, thanks to all the wonderful readers for all their wonderful reading. Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye. Small ladies' puppies.